There are moments in history that defy rational explanation, moments where the line between madness and reality blurs into something that still haunts us centuries later. What you're about to hear is one of those moments. A true story so strange that if it weren't documented by physicians, priests, and city officials, you might think it was invented. It's the summer of 1518. In the city of Strasbourg, a woman steps into the street and begins to dance. She doesn't stop. For days, she keeps moving. And then others join her. Dozens, then hundreds. Some of them will dance until their hearts give out. This is the story of the dancing plague of Strasbourg. To understand what happened in Strasbourg, you need to understand what the people there had already survived. The years leading up to 1518 were brutal. Strasbourg was part of the Holy Roman Empire, a crossroads of trade and culture. But it was also a city living under constant threat. In the years before 1518, Strasbourg had endured floods, extreme temperatures, famine, smallpox, syphilis, and outbreaks of bubonic plague. One catastrophe after another. The people were exhausted. Traumatized. Many believed the end of days was near. The church told them their suffering was divine punishment for sin. In this world of suffering, people looked to saints for both protection and fear. One saint in particular loomed large in the collective imagination of Strasbourg. The people of Strasbourg believed in Saint Vitus, a saint who could supposedly inflict dancing plagues upon sinners as punishment for their transgressions. This belief was widespread throughout the region. If you angered Saint Vitus, he would curse you. And that curse would force you to dance until you collapsed or died. It sounds like folklore, but in July of 1518, those fears seemed to come terrifyingly true. And it all started with one woman. On July 14, 1518, a woman known to history only as Frau Troffea stepped into a narrow street in Strasbourg, and she began to dance. There was no music, no celebration. She simply moved her body in a relentless, jerking dance. Hour after hour. She didn't stop for days. Frau Troffea danced until she collapsed from exhaustion. Authorities carried her away, but she wasn't finished. Once she recovered enough strength, she began dancing again. Her husband was baffled. Her neighbors were horrified. The physicians called to examine her could find no explanation. But Frau Troffea was just the beginning. Within a week, more than 30 people had joined her. Men, women, young and old, all dancing without control, without rest, without apparent reason. Within a month, the number of afflicted had reached approximately 400 people, all caught in the grip of an inexplicable compulsion to dance. This was not dancing as celebration. Witnesses described it as tortured, convulsive movement. The dancers' faces showed not joy but anguish. Many cried out for it to stop. They danced until their feet bled. They danced until they could no longer stand. And still, something forced them to keep moving. The dancing plague was meticulously documented by physician notes, cathedral sermons, local and regional chronicles, and notes issued by the Strasbourg City Council. This wasn't legend or rumor. City officials were desperately trying to manage a crisis they couldn't explain. They kept records because they needed solutions. At first, the authorities made a decision that seems bizarre today. They believed the dancers needed to dance the affliction out of their systems. The city hired musicians to play for the dancers. They constructed a wooden stage in the town square. They essentially encouraged the dancing to continue. The logic, rooted in medieval medicine, was that the dancers were suffering from an excess of hot blood. Movement would purge the imbalance from their bodies. But the strategy backfired catastrophically. The music didn't cure the dancers. It drew more people into the dance. The plague was spreading. At the plague's peak, some accounts claim as many as 15 people died per day from exhaustion, heart attacks, and strokes caused by the relentless dancing. People were literally dancing themselves to death. Their bodies couldn't withstand the sustained exertion, but their minds, or something else, wouldn't let them stop. Historians note that contemporary Strasbourg city records document the event itself, but don't actually record a death toll. The fatality claims come from later historical accounts. This doesn't mean deaths didn't occur. But it reminds us that even with well-documented events, some details become embellished as stories pass through time. What we know for certain is that the dancing was real, it was widespread, and the authorities eventually realized their approach was making things worse. By late August, the city changed tactics entirely. They banned public dancing and music. They cleared the streets and dispersed the crowds. The afflicted dancers were transported to a mountaintop shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus. There, they were made to pray for forgiveness and a cure. The choice of shrine was deliberate. If Saint Vitus had cursed them, only Saint Vitus could lift that curse. The cure had to match the belief system that shaped the disease. Each dancer was given a pair of red shoes and led around a wooden figure of the saint. They were anointed with holy oil. Priests prayed over them. And by September of 1518, the plague ended, as mysteriously as it had begun. The dancers gradually recovered. The crisis was over. So what actually happened in Strasbourg that summer? The historical evidence is clear that people danced. The question that still puzzles historians is why. Historical documents are clear that the victims danced. It is not known why. That's how one scholarly consensus puts it, with rare academic honesty. But several theories have emerged over the centuries. Each attempts to explain the inexplicable. And each reveals something about how we think about mind and body. One early theory blamed ergot, a fungus that grows on grain and can cause convulsions and hallucinations when consumed. Contaminated bread could have poisoned the town. Ergot poisoning, called ergotism, was known in medieval Europe as St. Anthony's fire. It causes burning sensations, gangrene, and sometimes wild movements. But critics of the ergot theory point out that it doesn't explain the specifically dance-like movements. Ergot causes spasms, not coordinated dancing. And there's another problem. Ergot poisoning causes severe gangrene, tissue death in the extremities. The historical records of the dancing plague don't mention gangrene at all. The leading modern theory comes from historian John Waller, who spent years studying the event. His explanation centers on something called mass psychogenic illness. Mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called mass hysteria, occurs when psychological distress manifests as physical symptoms that spread through a community. The symptoms aren't fake. The people experiencing them genuinely feel pain, or paralysis, or uncontrollable movement. But the cause is psychological, not physical. Waller argues that the people of Strasbourg were primed for exactly this kind of outbreak. Years of trauma had pushed them to a psychological breaking point. Waller wrote that the people were convinced Saint Vitus had unleashed a dancing curse, so once they entered a trance state, they acted according to that myth. In other words, their culture gave them a script for how a curse would manifest, and their traumatized minds followed that script unconsciously. This theory explains why the shrine cure worked. It wasn't about medicine. It was about giving people a culturally acceptable way to end their trance. If you believe a saint cursed you, and then a saint's shrine offers forgiveness, your mind can finally let go. The belief that caused the dance also ended it. Mass psychogenic illness isn't just a medieval phenomenon. Modern examples have been documented in schools, factories, and communities under stress around the world. In 1962, a laughter epidemic struck a girls' school in Tanzania. Students laughed uncontrollably for hours or days. It spread to nearby villages before fading. In 2011, teenagers in Leroy, New York, developed Tourette's-like symptoms, twitching and verbal outbursts, that spread through their high school. Doctors found no physical cause. Each outbreak shares common elements: a community under stress, a culturally available expression for that stress, and rapid spread through social networks. The dancing plague reveals something profound about human psychology. Our minds and bodies aren't as separate as we like to think. Psychological distress can manifest physically, and those symptoms can spread. When communities share beliefs, fears, and traumas, they can also share the physical expressions of those experiences. Consider how stress manifests in your own body. Headache, stomach pain, muscle tension. These are often psychological distress expressed physically. The body keeps score. Think about the belief systems that shape how you experience distress. Culture doesn't just influence what we think, it influences how our bodies respond to crisis. In our age of social media, ideas spread faster than ever before. Behaviors, fears, and even symptoms can become contagious in ways previous generations never imagined. Watch for patterns of mass behavior in your community, in online spaces, in yourself. Understanding how shared beliefs shape collective action is more important than ever. The people of Strasbourg in 1518 weren't crazy. They were traumatized, they were afraid, and their minds found an outlet that their culture provided. What happened to them was terrifying and real, and it reminds us that the human mind is capable of things we still don't fully understand. The next time you encounter a story that seems too strange to be true, pause before dismissing it. History is full of moments that challenge our assumptions about what's possible. Frau Troffea never explained why she started dancing that July morning. Maybe she couldn't. Sometimes the body acts before the mind can find words. 5 centuries later, her dance still echoes. A reminder that we are social creatures, bound together by beliefs that can heal us or drive us to our limits. If this episode made you think about the strange power of collective belief, share it with someone who appreciates history's strangest true stories. Subscribe to History That Hits for more stories that reveal the hidden forces shaping human behavior, past and present. Until next time, keep questioning what you think you know.